I want to welcome everybody to the second part of the Tactics, technically Session 3, Tactics Part 2. The weird sequelitis thing we got going on here. But no, did anybody get a chance to utilize any tactics this weekend? Did anybody have anything happen? No? Well, I'm sure it will eventually, so definitely. What we're gonna do is, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cover, kind of review what we talked about last week. The very first tactic is the Columbo Tactic. Again, we talked about Lieutenant Columbo and how he deals with things, and the key to the Columbo Tactic is this: the Christian goes on the offensive in a disarming way, with carefully selected questions to productively advance the conversation. So, again, we use these questions genuinely, and we use them not as an attack, but more as an being in inquisitive fashion, so that way we can get more information to know how to proceed. And then, next slide. So, can anybody tell me, what was the first question you're supposed to ask?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that? It gives an opportunity for the person to clarify their statement or claim, and it keeps you out of the hot seat. And it also keeps you in control of the conversation, because if the ball's in their court, they're the ones that have to actually defend what they say. Mm-hmm. And you can avoid committing the straw man fallacy, which is brilliantly defeating a claim that someone doesn't hold. You don't want to do that, and you can do that easily, but with the first question, the Columbo Tactic. Does anybody remember what the second Columbo Tactic question is? Yeah, that's right. How did you come to that conclusion? Which graciously what? Assumes they have come to a conclusion, right? But oftentimes they don't, or they haven't. Many claims are just regarded as things others have said, or without merit or factual basis. It is a fair challenge to make someone defend what they claim, and the rule is he who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. They might come to you, when you're asking these questions, they'll feel maybe a little pressure, and they'll come to you and be like, well, you believe this, and you believe that, and, the professor's ploy is kind of like that too. But, but if you never make a claim, then you never have to worry about defending that, and you can always say, well, no, I may believe just like you, I'm just asking questions. So, again, the pressure is all off of you, and remember that if they're the ones spouting off the claims, they've got to back them up. Does anybody remember what the third Columbo Tactic question is?
Shaping the argument or leading the way?
It's yes, and you can do that with the question, have you ever considered ... This is a question that all the other questions are leading up to. It also is a question that undermines the point of claim that they've just espoused. And you do have to know a few things to get to this point. But you do not have to go here if you're unprepared. You could simply use the Columbo Tactic to go into fact-finding mode. And that's also how you get out of the hot seat when someone is coming barreling down on you. They're coming at you with all these questions. Maybe you've never heard of some of the things that they're bringing forth. You can do this. You can stop even the most harshest critic by just saying, hey, why don't you do this? Tell me what you believe, why you believe it, and let me go think about it. And again, it's very easy to do. It's not hard to employ. Anybody can do that. And again, it just opens it up for conversation, letting the other person talk. So that way you can take notes and make sure that you write down exactly what that person believes and why they believe it, and it might bring up a couple more questions. But then you can go do your homework and come back at your leisure. So, and again, you can use this when someone's, like I said, coming, even using the Columbo Tactic on you. So Francis Schaeffer once said, human beings live in God's world, and they are the kind of creatures God has made them to be. They are made in the image of God, and that means anybody who denies that truth must live in some kind of contradiction. They'll affirm one thing in one hand, but on the other, they would still must live in God's world and be the kind of people God made them to be. Therefore, they will not be able to escape very long this contradiction without running into it. Our job is to keep our eyes open and our ears open, so when these points of contention come up, we'll be ready for it. And the very first thing we're going to talk about in one of these is the suicide tactic. again, you've heard the saying, if you give someone enough rope, they'll eventually hang themselves with it. There was a radio commentator that said, when someone's about to make an utter fool of themselves, get out of the way. And most suicidal claims are relativistic claims. And we're going to talk about these. Some statements involve claims that beat the statement itself up. We come across these arguments all the time. And they are necessarily false statements. And what do I mean by necessarily false? There is no possible universe that this can be true. God himself cannot make these statements true. If I told anybody here that I have a squared circle in the glove compartment of my car, would anybody here be interested in seeing that? I got some beachfront property in Montana I want to tell you too. When someone says something like there is no truth, is that statement true? There are no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure about that? Never take anyone's advice on that issue. Is that your advice to me? No one can know the truth about religion. Well, how did you come to that truth about religion? As I remember my coworker, everything is relative or an opinion. Is that your opinion? Then can I just ignore it? Talking about God is meaningless. What does this statement about God mean? You can only know truth through experience. Really, what experience taught you that you can only know things through experience? These are all self-refuting statements that cannot be true in any universe. But the thing that it does is it breaks a very natural law that we are all familiar with. It's called the law of non-contradiction. It's the objective statement that are true and not true at the same time. I cannot speak a word of English, and you can see how that would be bad if spoken in English. Wasn't that English? I used to believe in reincarnation, but that was another life. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. I wish I hadn't answered that because I'm tired of answering the question. I never repeat a word. Never. Or we're all familiar with this one. This page intentionally left blank. Wait. Then what? Anyway. I once actually had a coworker we were in conversation tell me, "How dare you think that of me? I don't care what anyone thinks of me." It's like, then why are we having this conversation? It's not hard to figure this stuff out. So there is actually an audio that I'd like to. Well, actually, before we get to that, your final step and only step in these scenarios is to point out the contradiction and let the view commit suicide. We're going to listen to an audio clip that Greg Kokel had with a chiropractor. It was a very interesting incident where a lot of the suicide stuff came into play. So I'll go ahead and play that.
I had a conversation with a young man, and you can read about this in the relativism book, at a chiropractor's office, and he was doing some rehab on me over a period of months because I had injured my back, I think, in this particular case, and I had a lot of chance to talk to him about Christianity. It was a nice, casual conversation, and he was an easygoing, very tolerant type of person, and very happy to talk about these things, until it got to the point in one of our conversations that we started talking about homosexuality, and it became clear that I thought homosexuality was immoral, and he was very upset with that judgment. And he says, you Christians are very nice people much of the time, but before long you start getting judgmental. Now I knew he had made a big mistake here, and so I'm going to use the suicide tactic to show him his error. And I said, well, Gil, what's wrong with that? He said, well, it's not right to be judgmental. You shouldn't judge. Well, what's that? That's a judgment, right? So I said, Gil, if it's wrong to judge, then why are you judging me right now? He'd never heard that before. He dropped back a few paces, and he's scratching his chin, and he's thinking about what just happened to him. He's trying to regroup a little bit here. Okay, I can hear him muttering to himself. No, that's not going to work. Finally he said, well, I guess it's okay to judge. But he wasn't going to let me off that easy. As long as you don't push your morality on someone else. Once you push your morality on somebody else, you cross the line. Now, he thought he had improved his lot. He had just gone out of the fire, out of the frying pan, right into the fire. I said, Gil, is that your morality? That it's wrong to push your moral views on other people? He said, yeah. He didn't see this coming at all. I said, then why are you what? Pushing it on me. Oh yeah, he's back here again, He makes a couple of false starts. He can't get going. He gets real frustrated. He said, well, it's not fair. I said, what do you mean it's not fair? He said, I can't find a way to say it which it sounds right. He thought I was playing a word trick on him or something. I said, Gil, it doesn't sound right because it's not right. It's self-refuting. You're doing the very thing you're telling me not to do. Sometimes I get to this point in a conversation and people will say, well, now you got me all confused. I said, no, you were confused when you started. You just now figured that out.
So, yeah, like I said, he has these great interactions with people all the time. Last week we actually had someone, I believe her name was Monique, the girl in the back. She had a very odd issue at work, and it was one of those things where even when she was mentioning it, it didn't really dawn on me until I was putting this together. That her work is basically, she's a social worker, and she said that she cannot proselytize to people that she's reaching out to. Even if they were to bring up religion, she herself cannot proselytize her own faith. Which is very interesting because this actually falls into the suicide category because, if she's at work and she didn't care whether she got fired or not, she could always ask her work, would it be fair to say that you do not want me to change other people's religious point of view? Which I'm sure they will say yes. Then she could follow up with, then why is it okay to change my religious point of view? I mean, Christianity is a missionary religion. It's the Great Commission. The workplace is holding on to a contradictory notion of moral and religious neutrality, a notion that actually does not exist. Relativism teaches that Christianity would be true for you, but not for me. And you can see that that's an objective claim, not a subjective claim, as they're trying to say. Relativism is not a neutral view. It's a postmodern view. Postmodern claims that there is no objective truth. This is why it feels such a tough position to be in. It's like saying, do whatever you want, but don't do that. It's self-defeating. Okay, so what's wrong with this picture? So, on the onset, I honestly am not trying to push one view or another when it comes to the George Zimmerman law case. I just happen to be walking through my work, one of the TVs, and I saw this, and I said, I have got to take a picture of this, because this is perfect for this class. So, what in the picture says, juror, he got away with murder. I just need to point this out. George Zimmerman, regardless of his innocence or guilt, was found not guilty. This is not a process of majority rules. It's not like 8 people said he wasn't, and 4 people said he was. It has to be a unanimous decision. It must come to a unanimous decision. If a hung jury happened, he could at least be retried, but not after a not guilty verdict from the jury. There may be good arguments to be made of George Zimmerman's guilt, but at the face of this picture, it comes off as self-contradictory because you've got the juror saying he got away with murder. Well, who let him get away with murder? It was you. It was you and the 11 other people on the jury. So, again, it's a self-defeating. This is a very self-defeating picture. An interesting thing, Hinduism actually holds on. One of their core beliefs is very it kind of falls into the suicide category. The core teaching of Hinduism is that everything is an illusion. The distinctions we see, you and I, we're illusions. Good, evil, morality, it's all an illusion called Maya, which is an equivalent to God's dream. We have forgotten we are an illusion, and we have to come to the realization that we are an illusion to return to the Godhead. Nirvana means extinction, an extinction of the illusion of self. But let me ask you this. If we're an illusion, how can we know we're an illusion? Some of you guys have dreamed last night, dreamt. How many there were characters and people in your dream. There were characters in your dream. Did they know they were dream characters? No, because they're dream characters. You can't have knowledge if you don't exist. Does Charlie Brown know he's a cartoon character? No, he's not real. So it's same thing. The core teaching of Hinduism seems patently false. And it's the reason why I'm not even remotely swayed to go towards Hinduism as far as religion goes. But you can see how it's self-refuting. Sibling rivalry. This is another suicidal claim. It offers 2 opposing ideas that don't go together when looked at, like arguing siblings. There was an Indian guy named Prakash Yasudian was approached by a Hindu man, and he asked, "Is Gandhi in heaven? heaven would be a poor place without Gandhi in it. So Prakash in Columbo fashion, well, if you know about heaven, then you must have some idea what qualifies you to get there. And the Hindu man said, good people go to heaven. So Prakash said, this idea of good and evil, I'm unclear with what you mean by that. Could you explain it to me? And the Hindu man said, the notion of good and evil are relative and cannot be defined. And then Prakash said, if that's true and good and evil cannot be defined, then how do you assume that Gandhi then is good and deserves to go to heaven? He noticed that the Hindu man was holding on to two conflicting beliefs, and one of those beliefs had to be surrendered to the other. I once talked to a Sharp, it was the same Sharp guy that I talked about last week, the guy who worked for Sharp. He was talking, I think it was even the same conversation, was talking to me and my coworker, the atheist, at the time, and he said, you could be a Muslim and believe that Jesus was the Son of God and died for your sins and still be saved. I said, Muslims don't believe that. They don't believe that at all. So if you believe that, you wouldn't be a Muslim. So, and I lost my presentation. There we go. Okay. So you can see how he's holding on to two different, he's holding on to two different things. He's actually kind of falling into the pluralism, way of thinking that pretty much all religions lead to God. And that actually leads me to my next point. Pluralism teaches that all religions are true. And if that's true, Christianity is true. One of the core beliefs of Christianity is it's true as opposed to other religions that are false, misleading, and lies of the devil. All religions then become true and false at the same time. You can see how these are conflicting views. These are, you just can't hold on to both of these notions. So I want to ask you guys, to defeat this claim. Okay, we're going to take a look at this, and I'll walk you through it how you defeat something like this. And it's something there was a YoPro that brought this up last week. God cannot exist because there is evil in the world. This is actually a moral relativism type claim. For them to make this claim, there has to be what? Evil in the world, right? And if there is no objective good or evil, then morality is simply what a person's opinion is. That would mean Jeffrey Dahmer just had an eating disorder. The difference between you and Hitler is the same difference between, if it's genetics, if morality is just genetics, the difference between you and Hitler is the same difference between blue eyes and brown eyes. Scary. You have to ask yourself, is there any place or time in which torturing babies for fun is acceptable? Or murdering an innocent human being? Is there? Probably, I would say no. But did someone have to tell you that? No. You can't have moral rules without transcendent moral rules. You can't have transcendent moral rules, rules that apply to all people in the same situation regardless of place, disposition, and time, without a transcendent moral rule giver. The argument, in turn, basically goes to show that the existence of evil actually proves the existence of God and not against his existence. There actually has to be evil in the world. Otherwise, it's just an opinion. It's kind of like saying, I can't believe in God. Why not? Brussels sprouts. Have you ever tasted those things? Well, I might actually agree with you on the taste of Brussels sprouts, but what does it have to do with the existence of God? Well, I can't believe in a God that would make something distasteful to me. If morality is not transcendent, then morality is reduced to mere opinions of right and wrong, with no authority to back it up. If evil objectively exists, it affirms his existence. The goal of the suicide tactics is to address the flaw in the argument and show that the claim cannot stand because of its inconsistencies. When you challenge someone's morality and they tell you can't say that something is immoral or not, how should people decide what is immoral or moral? I don't know if anybody's ever gotten this where people are like, oh, well, you might ask someone, what do you think? Who decides morality? And they were like, oh, I think everybody should decide for themselves. Okay, well, I think you're immoral, so what's your beef? It's like, if it's up just to me to decide, then I'll just decide that you're immoral. How about that? Is that okay? It doesn't make sense. So there has to be proper authority to back it up. So we're going to go into the next tactic called taking the roof off. Eric's going to pick it up from here.
All right. So when you get to the tactic of taking the roof off, the idea is that when someone makes a claim, sometimes it may come across as genuine. It may come across as, correct. You're not even sure. So a lot of times what you have to do is you got to get into it kind of like a car. You just got to drive it around a little bit. Put the top down. Take the roof off. Because a lot of times when you start to take the claims they make to its ultimate conclusion, it can come across as absurd or just wrong. So, so at first maybe perhaps their argument might look like this, but after you start to drive around, it turns into a pig car. It's a pig car. It's a pig car. Often at my work, I was talking before about my boss, how he likes to challenge people he calls hypocristians. But a lot of times, when he would challenge me, because my boss is pretty smart. He's not a gullible guy. He's not. He makes some foolish claims sometimes, but a lot of times what he'll do is, I use this tactic on my boss a lot, because what he'll do is he'll give me a claim. He'll make some statement on Christianity, or he used to, and I would at first just assume that he was correct. Everything he said was 100% true. And then, I would weigh it against, what I knew about the Bible, what I knew about Christians, what I knew about Christianity, and then, I'd start to see that his arguments start to break down. Because, even if it sounded really good, compared to the lives of, disciples that I know, like Steve Cannon, or, something just isn't right. Something is not coming across right. There's a flaw in there somewhere. So we start to talk it over, and then eventually we get to a point where it's like, oh, well, that, actually, your argument doesn't make sense because of this. So, for an example, in the outside world, this tactic is called reductio ad absurdum. An argument, for example, says, I don't think same-sex marriages should be sanctioned by the government. That would be a Christian standpoint. Well, opponent might say, well, people said the same thing about interracial marriages. They were wrong then, and you're wrong now. Same-sex marriages is right, or it's okay. And a way you can come back with that is, you think the government should approve of same-sex marriages? Opponent, of course. And then your rebuttal would be, but people said the government should approve of slavery at one point too. They were wrong then, and you're wrong now. Same-sex marriage is wrong. A lot of times too, people will tend to argue things, and it's a lot in today's culture too. You start to run into legality versus morality. Just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's moral, which we'll get to here in a second. Jesus himself actually used this tactic in Matthew 12, 24 through 26 and 28. He was talking to the Pharisee, and he says, but when the Pharisees heard this, they said, it is by Beelzebub, the prince of demons, that this fellow drives out demons. Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? But if it's by the Spirit of God that I drive out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. So the claim was that Jesus was driving out demons by the power of Satan. Jesus himself takes the roof off, saying if Satan drives out Satan, he's destroying his own kingdom, which is absurd. Therefore, Jesus' power must not come from Satan, but from God who opposes Satan. And ultimately, those who oppose Jesus are not opposing Satan, but God. And it's interesting, too, because a lot of these tactics you do see Jesus use in his ministry. It's pretty interesting. When you start to read it, you start to see Jesus putting these tactics into use. It's actually really cool when you start to reread through the Gospels and you start to see these things happening. So another type of argument, I know we talked a lot about homosexuality, but let's go one more example where it talks about if a man were to say, I should be able to sleep with men if I want to because it's natural for me to do so. I was born this way. Something we hear people make the claim of a lot. You're taking the roof off. What if someone were to say, what if, talk about if it's natural, then it's correct. What if someone were to get violent towards a gay person, or gay bashing is what they call it? If that came naturally to someone, would that be correct? Obviously, it's wrong. Therefore, just because an impulse is natural doesn't mean that it's moral. Homosexuality can't be justified in this way. Other groups of people who would say that they were born that way might be pedophiles. There's a huge movement of people out there right now who are advocating on the rights of people to be able to have relationships with children. I mean, it's out there. People are doing it. But it's wrong. But people can use the idea that, I was just born this way. I was just attracted to kids. I should totally be able to do that. It's scary. Just because it's natural doesn't make it moral.
Real quick, one of the things, too, is that they'll use the fact that homosexuals can get away with it, and they will use the exact same argument because it follows naturally. Well, if you allow it for this, why don't you allow it for that? Why don't you allow it for polygamy? Why don't you allow it for
all kinds of stuff?
Anything. Animals. Anything. Why not? Why? What's different about it?
And some
You're
some people will say a lot of times they'll use the argument that well, it appears in the animal kingdom. We've seen animals portray these particular traits. Animals do what comes natural, but the difference is that humans weigh what is natural with what is moral. That is one of the main differences between humans and animals. It's how we actually get civilization. The ultimate point being that we don't get to set the rules for living the Christian life. Look, but the same goes for heterosexuals. Heterosexuals, if it was a woman saying this, I should go sleep with men if I want to because it's naturally this. I was born this way. You don't get to just sleep around with whoever you want to, when you want to, just because it's natural. So if I'm against homosexuality and heterosexuality, I'm just eating everybody, I guess. No, but when it comes to Christianity, we don't get to set the rules. There are plenty of scriptures about taking off our old self and leaving it behind for the new self to be bound to our contract with God. Steamroller. So Chris kind of hit on this a little bit. When someone starts coming at you really aggressively, and they're just coming at you with claim after claim after claim after claim. Turn on the news, you'll see it. I guarantee you today. It doesn't even matter. Just watch a channel long enough, you're going to see a steamroller. And we see it. This is where someone starts talking over the person over and over and over and over again, and the person can't get a word in edgewise. And but it's supposed to be a discussion, because you hear a lot of people say, "Hey, is this a discussion, or are you just going to yell at me the whole time?" You start to see this a lot on TV anyway. Usually, people who have aggressive personalities will tend to do this to people, to steamroll. So how do you deal with that as Christians when you're trying to be a good ambassador? They keep interrupting. You're not getting a word in edgewise. This particular attack is designed to keep you on the defensive, but it has to be dealt with. And you can use your tactics so you don't get stuck in over your head. Because you remember, when someone gets mad, what happens? You lose. So this is kind of one of those tricky ones. This is a kind of a hard one to get into, because it can get heated fairly quickly, especially on your end if you feel like you're getting steamrolled. So the 3 tips towards overcoming steamrollers. The first one is you got to stop the person. Okay, so have them put it on pause for just a second and put forth a nice request to finish your point before going on to the next topic or question. Basically deal with the onslaught one question at a time. Ask him or her to give you adequate time. They give you something, you'll give them a time to respond, to either ask questions or make additional claims. And come to a mutual understanding that each of you will get your turn. So let's say that the person agrees to those rules, and then you go on and they start steamrolling you again. Then, number 2, you shame them. By the way, has anyone ever watched TV and seen this lady? She was on channel 23 back in the day. Or was it 43? So I don't know. Yeah, I used to always watch when I was a kid. I remember just the hand dial knob TVs. I get to a station and she'd be on there, and I never really paid a whole lot of attention, but I thought it was interesting. She actually just passed away a couple months ago.
Sister Angelica.
Yeah, Sister Angelica. See, so So anyway, when I was coming with this, I had to get this one because I just thought it was great. Shame. But shame the person. Basically, if they keep interrupting, sometimes you have to get a little bit more aggressive in your request for space. You say "Hey, I'd like to respond to your questions, but you keep breaking into my response. Could I have a few moments without being cut off to develop my point? Then you can tell me what you think. Is that all right with you?" And you have to wait for the response. Don't just assume they're going to be sure. Wait for the, pause. Let everybody else hear that they have given you that they've agreed to those terms. And whatever the response, hopefully it shows the kind of argument they're interested in having to you and to others listening. So try to stay pleasant and gracious, but stay in control. Diffuse the hostility if you can. So let's say that you've stopped everything, they've agreed to keep going on, and so you proceed forward, and then they start to do it again. Then the last thing I can tell you is just leave them. Because when all else fails, let it go. You can even let them have the satisfaction of having the last word. Then shake the dust off your feet and move on. Wisdom dictates not wasting any more time on foolish arguments. Because not everyone deserves an answer, because not everyone is looking for an answer. An ambassador is always ready to give an answer or response, but even Jesus said, "Do not throw your pearls to swine, or what? They will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." Jesus didn't answer Pilate, and even said to the Pharisees, "Neither will I tell you by whose authority I'm doing these things." because the Pharisees weren't interested in an answer. They were just trying to trap him. So, I believe, no, it's not the last one, but Sticks and Stones, this is a really interesting one. Sometimes people will come up make a claim that isn't really a claim. I mean, it's basically like, if they would come to you and be like, Christians are stupid. You know, that's the claim they're making. Christians are hypocrites, you know, and that's the reason why they don't want to follow Jesus. You know, these types of tactics focus on the believer and not the belief. It's just simple name calling and trash talk. And there's a really simple way to combat it, and that is, so? Christians are stupid. So what? Christianity isn't stupid. Well, the church's full of hypocrites. Well, when was the last time that you were at church? Jesus constantly battled the religious hypocrites. Christians in the Crusades killed people in the name of God. Well, Jesus never set this example, and he denies those who don't obey his teachings. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that I am a hypocrite, or I'm stupid. What's your argument? You know, what now? How does that answer the argument that I'm making or the facts presented? Like, it's really, these are really simple to, kind of like the suicide argument. These ones generally tend to be more in your face. Like I said, when it comes to like the name calling, it's pretty evident when it happens, and really the only answer you got to say is, so what? It doesn't, you know, the message is not the messenger, that type of thing.
Yeah, a lot of times they do it just to shut the conversation down. That's the only reason why they would name call, is to shut the conversation down.
Yeah. The next one is called the Rhodes Scholar, often called the fallacy of the expert witness. Obviously, there's a picture of Steve Jobs there. A lot of times, has anyone here ever run into a celebrity before? Like someone they really admired, like on TV or in the music industry or anything like that? I've run into a few. I used to work at the movie theater up in the Clearwater Crossing, and for whatever reason, that hotel that's right there on the corner, celebrities just love to stay there, like when they're in Indianapolis. So a lot of times they'll walk over to the movie theater, and you know, like, I've met like Shaquille O'Neal, like a lot of the Lakers when they were playing the Pacers and the finals one time. Ran into Dave Mustaine from Megadeth, which I know a lot of people don't know here about, but he was kind of cool back in the 90s. And you know, like there's a bunch of other people that have come in through there. But it's a lot of times you ever see people that are starstruck. They walk in and, you know, a movie star, or, you know, maybe even a politician or something starts to say something, and everyone just takes what they're saying as absolute fact, when they may not necessarily know anything about the field that they're necessarily talking about. That's the fallacy of the expert witness. People are believed because of their position rather than the facts. Like, for example, if the Pope came into your job and told you that you were terrible at your job, what was it that would make the Pope, like, knowledgeable or an expert in your field to know whether you're doing even a good job or not? He may not know enough about the trade to make those types of judgments or claims. Sometimes all you have to do is ask them where they got their facts. And many times it's simply just their opinions. But you must maintain that what they believe is not as important as why they believe it. The credentials aren't enough. You still need to have reason to be able to back up what it is, back up your claims. A lot of times they tend to, when you run into the Rhodes Scholar, they will tend to shift over to the bedtime story, which is very similar to when we talked about the fairy tales last week. And often, you know, when someone invents a hypothetical or a fancy story instead of producing real or logical arguments. You know, again, what if little Susie had this and that happen and this and that? Well, that's great. It's a great story, but there is no little Susie. Let's talk about facts. You know, what's your claim? What's your argument? How did you come to that conclusion? You know, you go into Columbo, and it's a great way to combat the bedtime story. But oftentimes the story is a distraction from the original point. And the last one we want to talk about is called just the facts. And this is where you yourself as a disciple can get into your own, like when you're studying out things yourself, take any particular topic that you're passionate about and learn facts, like be able to back things up. Become almost, in a sense, really an expert in certain areas, because especially, you know, in areas that people are going to argue in. We talked last week about things like topics that Christians and Christianity tend to overlook or just kind of skirt by because they're difficult topics to talk about. things like homosexuality, things like abortion, things like moral relativism, like evolution. Like pick a topic and just learn as much as you can about it. You can still be a Christian and hold really strong viewpoints on these topics and show people sometimes that people some people. This is going off a little bit. There was one argument I had with someone. I remember one time. I don't know if I was. I'm just going to go tell the story. It was something just popped in my head. But there was one time I was working at Target. I ran into a gentleman. He was looking for a Bible to buy, and he came in and he specifically wanted just the King James version because the King James version was the only true Bible. It's the only one that was from God because it was the only one not copywritten. Like, he told me all these things, and I was just like, wow, okay. I hadn't heard that before, but I knew people were really strong about the King James Bible, and so, ironically enough, I happened to be going on in the airport with my boss one day, and we were flying back home from Las Vegas from one of our conventions, and he turns to me and he says, and I knew him and my coworker were on the same side on this. He turns to me and he goes, "Eric, what happened to the unicorns?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "What did God, what did God do with all the unicorns?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? What did God do with all the unicorns?" He's like, "The unicorns are in the Bible." I said, "The unicorns aren't in the Bible." And he's like, "Oh, Kyle," it's my coworker, "Eric doesn't believe in the unicorns in the Bible." And I was like, "I've read the Bible 7 times through. I haven't run across any unicorns." And he's like, "Kyle, show him." And so Kyle, I'm like, "Were you guys planning this?" And Kyle brings up his phone. He brings up the Bible, and sure enough, there's in Psalms there's something about the unicorns and this and that, whatever. And I was like, "Wait a minute!" I said, "Give me your phone." He gave me the phone. I scrolled down, and it's the King James version. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And which, if you look at any other translation of the Bible, it talks about the horned beasts of the field. But in the King James version, it was translated to unicorns, and it shows up I think it's 19 times in the Old Testament, which is really funny. So because I did a search on it, and so now if you and only do this, by the way, if you're really close to the person, but don't do this. Don't be a jerk to this someone if they say this. But if they're like, "Oh, the King James Bible is the only true version of the Bible," it's like, well, then what happened to the unicorns? What are you talking about? They're the unicorns. Oh, you don't know about the unicorns? Like God is showing in the Bible the unicorns, right? Oh, well, no, where are the unicorns? It's really funny. See the look on their face. Well, no, it's the only version. La la la, they're unicorns. It's just one of those things that, like I said, if you know the person, you can joke around and have a good time with it. If you don't know the person, don't do that because then you have to work on your character as an ambassador. But one of the things, for example, just the facts. One of the topics that I became really passionate about, honestly, is abortion. That's one of the things that I personally, my wife and I have been trying to have kids for several years now, and very personal to us. It's because we've had these difficulty having children. We're looking at things like adoption and things like that. But I started looking up abortion because I saw people on both sides of the aisle arguing for it in the different cases. And I just became very impassioned about it because it really felt like my wife and I, it's personally for me, I really would like to have a child. And then I look at the abortion statistics and it feels like I see people just throwing children away for really no reason at all. And abortion tends to be one of those topics where people will pick 3 reasons why they try to make abortion okay. And there's if the child is born of incest or rape, or there's fetal abnormalities, the child's going to be born with a certain type of disease or health defect, or the other one is that the mother's health could be in question. When you look at it statistically, though, those 3 reasons are so minuscule in the entire scheme of things that, for example, the percentage that are performed because of rape or incest. Well, given that these 3 examples are what people talk about all the time, you would assume that these are the most common reasons why people get abortions, but it's not. Only 1% of all abortions that are performed are due because of rape or incest. Only 1% are because of fetal abnormalities. And 3% are due to the mother's health problems. And I got those statistics from the Center for Right to Life in Illinois. But going to the other side of the aisle, looking at Planned Parenthood, for example, they report that every year in America there are 2.2 million abortions done in the United States every year, and 46 million worldwide. That means per day there are approximately a little over 6,000 abortions done in the United States, and 126,000 every day around the world. And like, so if you take the 5%, if you even just take the 5% that, you know, the statistic where people would say, oh, these are the only reasons why people should have abortions, that would still mean that 95% of the abortions that are done out there are done, you know, because it's just inconvenient, or for other reasons that aren't these reasons. And so all this human life is being thrown away for what? And, you know, when you have these statistics and you're backing them up, you know, I'm backing this up through both Planned Parenthood and Center Illinois Right to Life, which is both sides, left and right, kind of leaning. So these are statistics that they would agree on. Like, well, as a Christian, I don't condone the death of anyone. Like, I don't even in would you murder a child? You know, if we believe that, you know, children are conceived and they're children when they're conceived, then the only difference is location, either in the womb or out of the womb. Is it okay to kill a newborn child because they were a product of rape or incest? Of course not.
There are legislators trying to push for the ability to abort a child out of the womb. It basically gives you 30 days to decide whether or not you want the child or not.
Yeah, that's true.
They're pushing it, and sincerely, they're going, why? And they're asking, why not? What is the difference? They're like, in the womb, out of the womb, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, fetal abnormalities. We all know children who have been born with defects, yeah, or you know, mental illnesses, things like that. Like, if they were born and they're that way, does that give you the right to die? No. And then, you know, due to the mother's health problems, you know, there have been people, like, obviously when it comes down to those particular types of situations, there are people who try to carry the child as long as they can to see if it can be, you know, born and live outside the womb, and, you know, these don't always have happy endings. You know, life is a dangerous place. Okay, like, it's just the world we live in. But taking the life of a child is always wrong. And, you know, knowing the facts, knowing these things, these statistics, actually talking about actual stories. There was a woman in Illinois who was in the news about a year or so ago, and they were interviewing her because she had been raped, and she chose to keep the child and raise it, and she was very happy with the child. Now, I'm not saying that's obviously always going to be the case, but there are, and of course people talk about there are other options, you know, once a child's born, adoption, you know, foster care system, things like that, to help the child to find a home where they are wanted if the mother can't accept the child. But, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, but I believe abortion is murder no matter what happens, because, you know, like I said, once the child's conceived, you know, you might look at an acorn and say, that's not a tree. Well, technically it is a tree. It's a tree at that stage of development. And you can say the same thing about a child in the womb. You're like, oh, well, that's not a person. No, it is a person. It's a person at that stage of development. And, you know, to take that life at any point is wrong. And that's what I believe. And I would say, you know, when people start to use a lot of these excuses, like, well, what if this happens? What if that? You know, even the bedtime stories. Well, what if, you know, so-and-so gets, you know, impregnated by rape? Well, I'm like, well, do you know how often that happens? No, 1% of the time. You know, and even then, that doesn't mean that we, like I said, we don't kill children because they were born of rape or incest. It just doesn't happen. There are children in this building when we worship on Sunday who were born due to incest and problems like that. You may not even know who they are, but they were. Like, and they're still here with us, you know. The mother chose to have the child. It's like, it happens. So anyway, but that just the facts is something like I really recommend for disciples. Like, you know, you pick a topic or two and just get as much facts as you can, so you can have conversation. When people bring up a lot of these harder topics, don't feel like you have to avoid them. Using the Columbo tactics, using these tactics, pointing out flaws in people's arguments, like, you can you can make a lot of headway and a lot of in difference in people's lives and help kind of change their opinion of things into a more Christ-like mindset just by knowing things. So we should always be striving to learn more and pursue knowledge, pursue these things, pursue the facts, pursue knowledge and God and wisdom, because that's how Jesus fought. You know, he didn't fight with swords. He fought with wisdom and knowledge. So anyway, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris here to kind of close us off.
Okay. So basically, this is kind of the end of the actual tactics series. Again, next week we're going to go over practical applications, looking at news articles, pictures, things that we found online that we can each break down into small groups and discuss and talk about, you know, what tactic you would use, what's the problem with the argument, and then how would you come to a better conclusion maybe in certain circumstances. It's going to be a lot of fun. We did it, this particular thing, the last time we taught the tactic session for midweeks over on the southeast side, and it was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. So I really encourage everybody to be here next week for that. But there are some tips for engaging your targets. Be ready to make the most of every opportunity. Keep it simple. You don't have to bring to the foot of the cross in every session, every time you meet them. You know, it's like I said, we're just trying to get them to think about it. You know, put a rock in their shoe. Avoid kingdom jargon. It comes across as hokey, or you know, you lose the interest of your hearer if you're just spouting off like Christian words and lingo. You know, and people just kind of get tired of it. And our world is definitely getting to that point. So if you bring it down to a more, I guess, general level, when you're talking to people, don't explain things down. I say down to the level. Explain it to them, because just an easier way of understanding things. You can always do that. Focus on the truths of Christianity, not just its personal benefits. You know, because there is truth to Christianity, and some people may not like the truth, but it's true nonetheless, right? Give good reasons for your arguments. You got to know your stuff. You know, like I said, get to know the facts, like Eric's talked about. Stay calm. Don't lose your cool or get mad or on the defensive. If they want to go, let them leave. Don't force arguments or conversations with people. There was a brother in the church who said that he was reaching out to someone, and a younger guy, and the dad came up, grabbed them, and ran off with them. Like, oh my gosh. Wow. Just wow. Okay. But let those things go. But if you do get into conversations, don't necessarily let them leave empty-handed. You know, give them a way to follow up on what you challenged them with, or church invitation. You know, come back to them later. Say, hey, have you thought about what we talked about? Did you ever give it more consideration? You know, like I said, get some intellectual honesty from people. It's always good. So that actually brings us to the end. Are there any questions? Anybody have any situations they may be looking at?
Question.
Yeah.
I appreciate all the different tactics you guys have brought up. It's really got me thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to get your opinion on how you would respond to this situation. I started a Bible discussion group at Caterpillar, and it took about 6 months to convince HR to allow me to do that. And their one comment to me was, it's okay if you do this, but you just can't offend anyone. So I didn't answer it. I just kind of I just wanted to get their approval, so I didn't push it. But what would you have said to that? Or would you have
That offends me that you would ask that or say that to me.
Or you might want to repeat the question.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he was asking, basically, he's starting a Bible discussion group at Caterpillar, and he took it to his HR to ask whether or not that was okay, and and let me get your question right, they said, it's okay to do this as long as you don't offend anybody. Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, it's kind of, what they're doing is relativizing your situation in a sense.
Well, let's open it up real quick. I mean, how would you guys? What questions could you ask to go after something like that?
How would I offend anybody in doing this?
How would I offend somebody?
How would I know?
How would I know if I'm offending somebody that what I'm about to teach is going to offend somebody? Gosh, people take everything to an offense nowadays. Everything.
I think you could ask for clarification. What do you mean by that? You
Yep.
know.
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
This is definitely a good time to ask that question.
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean by offend people?
Yeah. Nowadays, if you call someone a him or a her and you get your pronouns incorrect, you've offended somebody. So, yeah, it's crazy. And I remember Monique talking about that in her work and how just it's become so relativized that it loses all truth. You can't even talk to people about truth because it's just your truth. It's true for you, but it's not for me. So why are you trying to push that off on me? There are no moral rules. There are no moral rules. Here's one. It's wrong for you to push your morals on other people. Yeah. So again, a lot of this is self-refuting stuff, but yeah, that would definitely be a good question to ask. And obviously, you got to, with work situations, you have to be sensitive to that kind of stuff. And I honestly, I would challenge, even if you have to challenge people and just say, hey, if anybody's offended by what I'm saying, can we please just talk about it? It's like, because what we're trying to have is an open, honest discussion, and we can do that without having to step on each other's feet, but to get the arguments on the table and see whose ideas are better, right? Yeah.
Maybe something like just presenting facts, presenting a way of life, presenting something that
Oh, we lost somebody.
you don't have to believe or agree with me on. This is just for, discussion purposes, just to see where you are, give you some food for thought.
Yeah, you could say, yeah, you can play the relativistic game, or play it on. It's like, well, I'm just giving my opinion, and people can take that as their own if they want, or they can refuse it.
I would just ask, like you said, the HR, what do you deem offensive?
Yeah, just asking HR what do they deem offensive. And it'd be interesting to see what the response is. We're actually going to look at, there's a college campus in one of our practical applications that, I hate to spoil it for everybody, but basically says you can be a Christian, you can have any organization you want on campus, Christian or not, but you can't say any of your views are correct. Like, wait, what? Like it says you cannot specifically, you can't teach. I'd have to look at the wording on it, but it's basically you can't have defined beliefs. It's like, what? Like, who lives that way? Just curious. Anyway, okay. Well, are there any other questions? Yeah.
I was just going to add to what Lee said. Could you say, is it somebody that you know? Like, could you appeal to them on the, like, do you find me offensive? Do you know who, I mean, like, could you say, well, you know me.
Yeah.
Find me,
Yeah. Do I come across? Do I come across as someone who would bring something offensive?
Yeah.
Have I offended you in any way? That you would have an objection?
You could even tell them, why don't you be the first one there? You could find out what we're going to
Yeah.
do. And kind of
Come on down and listen and see if you find any of it offensive. It'd be great. They may take you up on that challenge. Be careful.
I enjoyed this class and the last one, and I've had a couple conversations with people who tell me I'm an atheist, and I'm a little too argumentative, a little too in people's face. And I appreciate you guys reminding me that I'm that way. But my favorite comeback is I don't believe in atheists. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And then it's like, well, you have a way to decide what's right and wrong and what you're going to do each day. What is that? They say, well, that's me. I said, well, that is your God. And then that's what you believe in. And then it kind of, it's led to some good discussions, hasn't led to any conversions. One of the facts that I researched that really helped me was, this evil in the world is a common argument. But if you look at the good that's done by Christianity, most of the hospitals in the United States are not-for-profits, and most are run by faith-based organizations. So it's the wonderful life argument, I think it's called. You take out what would happen if Christianity didn't exist, and most of our hospitals gone, most of our the aid programs gone.
Yeah, people don't look at the bigger picture when it comes to Christianity, the existence of Christianity in our world. Most universities were founded by Christian institutions.
Exactly.
Most, even scientific endeavors were created by Christians.
Yeah.
To not only prove the existence of God, but to show how He did things. A lot of people think faith and science are at odds, but they're not. Like methodically, in the methodology, that's what I'm trying to say. We want science to prove exactly what we're saying, and so far it has. There's nothing that contradicts that. It's the philosophy of science. Nothing can exist outside the physical universe. Really? Nothing? Including justice and love? It's interesting. And they'll even tell you that the philosophy trumps the methodology every time. It is a rigged game, and they will tell you that it's rigged. They'll even say it's because we can't let a god get a foothold in the door, regardless of how absurd it is. And they're on record, on record saying this. So I'm not just saying something. They're on record saying this, and which goes to prove that we make good points. We have the facts really are on our side. And I'm telling you guys, using the tactics that we've presented here today, you're going to be able to handle yourselves better than you think you can. Just get in those conversations. Use these things. I'm telling you, it's very effective. And the smartest people you can think of, scientists, lawyers, you name it, people make very foolish arguments when it comes to spiritual things, and very easily, very easy things to handle too. So
It's just like I see what you're saying when it comes to science, because my brother, he's a packaging engineer. He just finished his schooling. And we were just having a conversation in the car, and I said, how do you feel, because he visited the church. I said, well, how do you feel, did you enjoy yourself? And he's like, yeah, I just got questions. And I was like, well, what questions? And he said, well, who created God?
Oh, I love that.
I said, well, he just simply exists, Well, something had to create him. He just didn't come out of thin air. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really know how to answer him. And I said, well, do you think you're going to heaven? Well, yeah, everybody's going to heaven. And I said, well, if that's the case, then why are you questioning it? How do you know that if you don't believe?
It's a category fallacy to say that God needs a creator. It's like asking who painted the painter.
Mm-hmm. And who did it? Where did it come from?
Who sculpted the sculptor?
Yep. And I tried to get him to come. I said, well, if you have questions, I could get you with some guys that they can answer those questions for you.
Oh.
And he never.
No, he's killed my presentation.
He never.
Right, and
That was in Bill.
Oh, he never came.
He got scared.
Oh, yeah, it's because they don't. Not everyone wants to be challenged on their own beliefs, but it's a categorical fallacy to think that way, and there are answers to those things. But we do need to wrap this up. If you guys have questions afterwards, feel free to come and ask us. I thank you all for being here. Please be here next week. We're going to have a lot of fun with the practical application. Thanks.